spent some time playing New World, and the truth is I kind of felt a little bit burned out on it after just maybe 4 days or so of playing it again. And it's kind of funny because the combat feels nice. It feels impactful. A lot better than what ESO feels like. ESO is very floaty, and it's just kind of... It feels like in ESO you kind of just click the enemy until he dies. It just doesn't feel good like New World does. And there's other things about New World that are really, really cool, like a wide open world without loading screens and environmental effects, which are quite beautiful, really. But what I can't get past with New World, and there's a lot of games like this, it really just feels like a shiny reskin of something that isn't new or original at all. So maybe the grass waving looks better. Maybe the impact of a weapon feels better. But what happens when you've killed your 1000th zombie? Does it really matter how it feels? It's gonna feel pretty samey either way. And that's where it kind of comes down to the spirit of a thing. Is there something foundationally different that makes something special in the sense that it has its own identity? And Elder Scrolls is a great example of something which very much has its own identity. It's been building its own story, its own very unique world, its lore for the last 3 decades. Even if you don't play Elder Scrolls video games, you could still, just as a fan of fantasy worlds in general, take an interest in what the Elder Scrolls is and what it's become. But take a game like New World, and if you took the game out of the world, you wouldn't really have any world left. Try going into a city in New World and explore the different buildings and explore the town, and you realize there's nothing really special about anybody's houses. There's not really anything special about any of the towns. The taverns and inns feel oddly sparse because hypothetically they'd be places where people would congregate, but no one's really congregating there because there's not really any reason to be there. So it comes down to combat mechanics. But if that's all there is, that's kind of empty. And I think that's really something that applies in a lot of games, and it applies in our lives. There's a lot of good stuff out there, great content, but it just is taking something that already exists and then kind of developing its own take on it, but it's not really doing anything original, nothing truly new. And that doesn't make it bad, but it makes it grow stale a lot more quickly. It's like a relationship where maybe you have a spouse who's really pretty, but she doesn't really have any unique personality to back it up. She's just this pretty face. Well, you need something more that's going to make you say, this is amazing as the years go by. Something when the beauty fades and you're old and graying out and all of that, that the person you love is still special, even after all the beauty outwardly fades. And all of the cosmetic aspects stop being relevant. The same thing with a game. Yes, we like good graphics, we like good mechanics, but isn't what really matters good storytelling? Something that really gets your imagination kicked into gear. Because at some point, in the end, everything's boring. Just like everybody grows old. Sure, beauty is nice. Don't get me wrong. If you think beauty doesn't matter, you're totally wrong. And there are people out there that want to go ditch to ditch and say, well, you know, beauty doesn't matter. It's just a construct of some patriarchy or something. You know, they'll say, well, if you think that someone who's attractive should be favored more than somebody who's ugly, well, then you're just non-inclusive and you're an idiot. Well, that's not fair. Because the truth is that some people are more attractive than others. Whether you like it or not, that's the truth. Lying to yourself about it isn't going to change that. Just like Elder Scrolls Online looks a whole heck of a lot better than old school RuneScape. And yet, I also really like the world of Elder Scrolls Online a lot better than the world of Aeternum in New World. One captures my imagination. The other one just feels like a cool but ultimately soulless game world. So what is the takeaway? The takeaway is that beauty matters, but it can't be the only thing. And there's also a lesson there about the importance of being unique, being willing to be different. We live in a time where we're often pressured by society to be conformists in some way, even if we say that we're not that way. The truth is, all societies are like that. The more people have the ability to be connected to each other, the more they measure themselves up against each other. And the prevalence of social media and the internet and the technology-driven world makes us more inclined than ever to measure up against other people and then judge what we do based on what other people are doing, and define what we think based on what other people think. But then we wind up being kind of like all of those games that get released that look really cool, and you say, wow, that's amazing, until you sit down and play it and you realize, you know, I've seen this before. Yes, it might look a little bit different, but there's nothing foundationally new here. This is just a reskin of the same old thing. So if it's going to just be a reskin of the same old thing with a little bit less soul, then why not stick with the classic? You see? Nobody wants to start over just so that they can commit to something that has less substance than what they left, even if it is a little bit more wrapped in a pretty skin. In our lives, we can embrace being different and have our quirks, have things that are unique to our character, hobbies that are interesting to us that maybe aren't interesting to other people, outlooks on the world or politics or lifestyle that are totally different than what most people feel or believe or do. And when we embrace the willingness to be different, to have our own brand, that's what gives us staying power and makes it possible to live a life that ages like fine wine. It doesn't mean that you throw out every form of convention. And certainly in design, we see this, where sometimes something goes all the way from being different into being so ridiculously weird it just doesn't have any appeal. Because it's grotesque. It's not just different. It's an extreme aberration. You know, maybe being different is not being afraid to go to a convention and cosplay your favorite video game character. Maybe that's a reasonable sort of different. But then I saw a thing about this guy, and he made a realistic dog suit, had it designed for himself, and then he lives the life of a dog. And he walks on all fours, and he has people take him for a walk, and he tries to basically imagine that he is in fact a dog. He sees himself as a dog. Well, that's kind of where I'm going. You can be different, and you can be functionally different, or you can be a total weirdo off the rails. And that ain't going to help you either. So you got to be somewhat connected to reality. And if you don't connect yourself to some grounding in reality, then you're not going to be much use to yourself or others, really. But you also don't want to just be a cookie cutter. And there's a lot of people who are exactly that. Everybody says, well, I'm doing my own thing, but what are they really doing? They're all lined up at the same car dealership. They're all going deep in debt so they can get the exact same overpriced pickup truck, right? They're all competing for the same career advancement path so that they can measure up to all their neighbors that live in houses that look identical. What good is any of that? You gotta have something that makes you stand out for you. Something that makes you unique, so that when you go through life and you pass on, there's some reason why somebody might say, you know what, that guy was different. I remember him because this is what he did that was unique. If you don't have anything at all that makes you unique, because you're so busy trying to compete with all the normies and blend in, well, even if you win, you're going to be like that video game that looks pretty, that looks cool, by many measures should be popular, but it just doesn't really have any staying power. Because even though people will get excited, they'll jump into the latest new thing, those people will also usually jump out just as quick as they jump in. That's what happened to the New World game. When it first launched, everybody was excited about it, I remember. But then all those people realized it wasn't foundationally a revolutionary new thing. It was just an okay game. That's all it was. So all those tons and tons of people that were obsessed with getting their hands on it, they got bored. They moved on. You got a few people that learned to like it, that really enjoy the game. But that game's probably never going to be at the level of some of the legacy franchises out there, because it doesn't really have any firm identity of its own. So take that as you will, whether we're talking about what video game to play or we're talking about what kind of a life to live. Invest your time and your energy into things that are good, into things that are beautiful, into things that are lovely. But also make sure that below all of the superficial things, there's something meaningful underneath. Make sure that you aren't just looking at the surface things and thinking that they are enough to make a good experience. Because at some point, no matter who you are, no matter what you're doing, it's what's inside that counts. Till next time. Thank you for watching.